A veteran police officer vanishes without a trace.
I knew when he didn't show up to pick his son up that something was wrong.
He wasn't answering his cell phone.
Sending Memphis police on a search for one of their own.
They really knew that something was wrong because missing work is something that he didn't do.
Was the officer's disappearance work-related?
We handled high crime areas, we handled narcotics.
Or was there another explanation?
There was certainly a double life going on.
Tony was very loving, very smooth. Tony would make you feel like you were the only one.
But in Tony's case, sometimes there wasn't only one.
We know he was involved with the sheriff's deputy, a jailer.
And with Tony missing, his jailer girlfriend would have some explaining to do to make sure she didn't spend time on the other side of the bars. South Memphis backyard when Ethel Hayes glanced anxiously at her watch. Her son, Memphis police officer Tony Hayes, had missed the party.
We knew something was wrong because we hadn't heard from him, and he wasn't answering his cell phone. And that's very strange for him.
Worried, Ethel Hayes contacted the police department later that evening and filed a missing persons report. The next morning, Memphis detectives were briefed that one of their own was missing.
It was first leveled as a missing persons report, and I had not risen to the level of a homicide investigation.
The Memphis Police Department had gone through his home, had searched the outside of his property.
Investigators also turned to Tony's girlfriend, Monique Johnson, to see if she had any idea where he might be. But the 37-year-old corrections officer seemed as perplexed as police.
She was asked over and over again if there had been any problems between her and Tony Hayes, and she replied no, none at all.
I told him that I didn't know where he was.
Did that mean Tony was truly missing? Or just that he didn't want to be found?
Tony was a ladies' man, and Tony talked to other women.
When Monique and I first discussed that he was missing, I told her, oh, girl, he probably done got with one of them women.
Over the next several days, police talked with Tony's family and friends, hoping to find a clue to their fellow officers' whereabouts. And when Tony didn't show up for work on Thursday, his first day back on the job after the Labor Day holiday, the search intensified.
They thought maybe he might have just packed a bag and went out of town for a few days. They called a roll and he didn't answer roll, so that's when they really knew that something was wrong.
Memphis police also feared that Tony might have run into trouble on the job.
Tony Hayes had had an altercation with some suspects, and there were some threats leveled against him by those suspects that they would report him for being too aggressive with them.
But were the allegations true? Or as the mystery of Tony's disappearance would prove, does the line between aggressor and victim depend on who's doing the talking? By 2005, 36-year-old Tony Hayes had been in his share of tough spots.
In the Persian Gulf, he served his country during wartime. He went to the Marine Corps, and when he came back, he was blessed to get on to the Shelby County Police Department at that time.
After that, he applied with the Memphis Police Department, started out in uniform patrol, just regular uniform patrol, just as I did, and moved up to a plainclothes position.
Tony also moonlighted as a security guard in an apartment complex on the city's east side. That's where he met Monique Johnson in 2005. A corrections officer at the Shelby County Jail, Monique lived at the apartments with her teenage son, Donald.
He used to try to flirt with a lot of women when they come through the apartments, try to talk to him.
Quite a few women appreciated Tony's attention, including Monique.
I thought he was a nice-looking man. He was, well-dressed. He was actually outside talking to my son when I first met him. I walked out the house to get in the car. That's when Tony and I exchanged phone numbers.
But despite Tony's good looks, Monique wasn't quite ready to jump into a new relationship. A two-time divorcee, she was in the process of trying to rebuild her life.
Monique did have a history of unhealthy relationships, if you will, of men who didn't treat her right, didn't appreciate her.
Tony soon called, but Monique, unsure of what to do, turned to her friends for advice.
She was like, and I don't know if I should talk to him because you know how my relationships has been. And I was like, well, if you feel you need to take it slow, take it slow.
Eventually, Monique returned Tony's call and agreed to go out with him on one condition.
I told him I didn't want to be involved with anybody that was in a relationship with somebody.
He talked about his prior marriages, but that he was single and was not married.
Tony also told Monique that since he too was twice divorced, most recently from the mother of his young son, he understood why she was being cautious. Then, over the next few weeks, Tony worked to gain her trust.
He would bring her flowers. He was spending time with her. They were having 2- and 3-hour phone conversations.
Things finally seemed to be going Monique's way. She moved into a new house with her son and continued to see Tony on a regular basis.
They went out of town together a couple times. They used to go out to eat a lot.
He was involved in Monique's son's life. They were close. Things were good.
But a few months into the relationship, according to Monique, things started to change.
He used to call all the time and text, and if I didn't answer, that was a problem. It was like, where you at? Where you been? Who you with?
Why didn't Tony trust Monique? One afternoon, while Monique was complaining to some friends about Tony's need to keep tabs on her, Monique's cousin suggested an answer.
My cousin was like, he sounds like somebody that's married.
Did Tony suspect Monique was sneaking around on him because he was also cheating in order to be with her? There was, according to Monique's cousin, one way to find out. Monique called the county clerk's office and found out that Tony had told the truth about his number of divorces, but not his number of marriages.
They told me, yes, he was married. They gave me the date he was married, which was actually, he got married 3 months before I met him.
He's having this relationship with Monique. He's married at the same time, has ex-wives. So certainly this starts to come out.
Monique, however, wanted to hear it from Tony.
I asked him why did he lie about not being married. He hesitated, and I was like, don't lie, because I already know.
Reluctantly, Tony admitted that he was still married, but he also offered an explanation.
He convinced her, okay, my wife and I are separated. It's not anything going on anymore. You and I are together. You and I are the relationship.
He said that he was in the process of trying to get a divorce, but money was tight. And once he got some money, that he was going to file for a divorce.
Monique agreed to give Tony a second chance, but not before setting the record straight with the wife.
Monique Johnson called her directly and stated that she was seeing Tony.
She did confirm they were separated, but she didn't say how long they had been separated.
With Tony's skeleton out of the closet, he and Monique gave their relationship another shot. And for a few months, it seemed to return to stable ground. That is, until Tony's cell phone started ringing at all hours of the night.
There would be times when they would be together at the house during bedtime hours, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. His cell phone would ring, 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 ring.
Finally, Monique confronted Tony about the calls.
I was like, won't you answer the phone? And he was like, there's nobody there, call back.
On May 19th, Monique managed to sneak a peek at Tony's phone.
He just had various text messages in there from women. They was texting him with some of the text messages saying, good morning, baby, stuff like that.
Later that afternoon, Tony returned home to a house that was in shambles.
She put oil in his shoes, ripped clothes, ripped to shred. Pants, shirts, just tore them apart. Keyed his card outside, keyed them up and down, back and forth.
I wrote bitch on it because that's how I felt about him, and to me, that's what he was acting like.
She was out of control. She let her jealous rage take the best of her.
Her rage spent ransacking the house. Monique calmly told Tony they were through.
I say it's over, and he's like, no, it's not over. You can't leave. You're going to be with me. He said, if you leave me, then I'm gonna go ahead with the order, have them, to press charges.
Monique's outburst had given her lover leverage. If Tony pressed charges over the property damage, she could lose her job as a corrections officer. She wouldn't be able to pay her bills or care for her son. Monique, for the time being, felt trapped in the relationship.
I just stayed in it. And no charges was pressed against me. It was just his report where he had initially called and filed it.
Over the next several months, Monique and Tony tried to reconcile. But it wasn't long before their relationship had once again broken down into an endless cycle of arguments and accusations.
They're fighting about what they usually fight about. You're cheating on me. I know you're cheating on me. I've checked your phone. Why are you checking my phone? The back and forth. So there was certainly jealousy on both ends.
Labor Day, September 4th, 2006. Tony Hayes' 11-year-old son sat waiting for his father to pick him up and take him to a mid-afternoon barbecue at his grandmother's house. But by sundown, the boy hadn't seen or heard from his father.
He tried to call his father several times, got no answer. Called some more, never heard from Tony, and knew that there was something wrong.
Concerned, the boy called his mother, Tony's ex-wife.
He called me on Labor Day and he said, Mom, my dad's not answering the phone.
LaTanya also tried calling Tony. She didn't get an answer either, so she called Tony's mom.
And I said, something is not right. I said, I don't want to scare you. Please go fill out a missing persons report. I said, something is not right.
So I called the precinct where he worked and asked them if they would send a car out to the apartments where he worked to see if they could see him.
While Tony's mother spoke with Tony's friends at the police department, his ex-wife LaTanya decided to do some investigating of her own. She called Monique Johnson to see if she knew where Tony might be.
And I said, have you heard from Tony? She said, he's probably on a date. And I said, on a date? But she was screaming it. He's probably on a date. He's nothing but a liar and a cheater.
Coming up, police, desperate to find their fellow officer, uncover a possible clue.
That morning, about 7 a.m., Tony Hayes got a text message.
On the afternoon of September 5th, 2006, Memphis police officer Tony Hayes had been missing for more than 24 hours. Investigators had been busy searching for their lost colleague.
They said, this is not a man who would go missing. This is not a man who shows up late for work. This is not a man who doesn't call his family.
Could Tony have run into trouble related to his job?
Tony worked in the West Precinct of Memphis, which is a rough precinct. And when one works in a rough precinct, there's all the more likelihood to get into physical encounters with suspects.
A search of his house revealed Tony's Lexus was missing from his garage. But there were no signs of forced entrance or foul play. Detectives paid a visit to Tony's girlfriend, Monique Johnson, to see if she could shed any light on the case.
Her being very close to Tony Hayes, they figured that she would have a lot of information.
But when detectives asked the 37-year-old corrections officer if she knew anything about Tony's whereabouts, she insisted she didn't.
She had no other explanation other than, I haven't heard from Tony since 11 a.m. that day.
However, she did mention that Tony had run into trouble at the apartments where he worked as a security guard.
She said, I had talked to him about some guys at the apartment where he worked. He had got into it with them.
Investigators, however, couldn't help but notice Monique's demeanor as she spoke about her missing boyfriend.
She appeared to be very calm, very collected, and stared at them with this very stern gaze that frightened the detectives a little bit.
At the end of the interview, detectives handed Monique a card with their phone number and asked her to call them if she heard anything.
An entire 2 days passed, and Monique Johnson never called Sergeant Mason to ask about the status of the investigation.
By Thursday afternoon, with Tony missing for more than 72 hours, Sergeant Caroline Mason contacted Monique a second time.
She told me that they needed me to come downtown. They had some, wanted to take a statement.
Once inside an interrogation room at Memphis PD, detectives pressed Monique to tell them everything she knew about Tony's disappearance. She was not cooperative.
She started to grow very defensive. She stared at the police a lot, and it took her a very long time to answer questions. And of course, this struck the police as suspicious.
Meanwhile, outside the interrogation room, more detectives poured through Tony Hayes' subpoenaed cell phone records in hopes they'd find some clue to his location. And they did.
That morning, about 7 a.m., Tony Hayes got a text message from a female friend of his named Kim Chisholm.
The investigators immediately called Kim and asked her to come down to the station. Asked about her relationship with Tony, Kim admitted she'd been casually dating him.
Kim Chisholm and Tony Hayes had been seeing each other for a couple of months.
But the last she'd been in contact with Tony, according to Kim, was on the morning of September 4th.
She texted him, asking him if he would like to go for a jog.
Later that morning, according to what Kim told police, she'd received a call from Tony's phone. She'd answered it expecting Tony. Instead, Kim told police it had been Monique.
Monique actually called the woman who had been repeatedly calling Tony.
The call had abruptly dropped, but not before, according to Kim, she'd heard Monique screaming at Tony in the background.
Kim could hear Monique yelling at him that she had had it with him seeing other women.
Within minutes of taking Kim's statement, detectives confronted Monique with the new information. They knew all about her heated conversation with Tony. Then, they accused her of killing him.
Detective asked Monique Johnson that for the sake of closure and for the sake of the family, to just tell them where the body is.
I end up telling them, they asked where was it. I told them I couldn't tell them where it was that I could take him.
Monique explained to the police it had all started when she discovered a text message on Monday morning, September 4th.
I was in the bathroom getting ready to go home. His phone started vibrating, and I picked it up, and that was a text message. And it said, "Good morning, baby."
Suspecting Tony was cheating on her again, Monique said she'd pocketed his phone. Then, kissing Tony goodbye, she'd driven back to her house. On the way, however, she'd placed a call on Tony's phone.
I went to that text message and pushed send, and it called that person that sent the text.
And just as Monique had expected, a woman answered.
She was like, "Hey, baby." And I was like, "No, this isn't baby, this baby's girlfriend."
Monique had essentially caught Tony cheating. And Tony, as she explained to police, knew it.
As she was having this conversation on the telephone, she looks in her rearview mirror and sees that Tony's following very closely behind her.
He was almost running to the back of my car.
And when she pulled into her garage minutes later, according to what Monique told police, Tony parked behind her and ran up to her car.
And he was telling me to get out of the car so we could talk, and I told him it was nothing to talk about. And he had pulled on the door handle a couple of times, and my door was locked.
He's telling her to get out of the car, to give him his phone. He needs to talk to her. He wants to be with her. He's tired of all of this. And Monique's telling him it's over. This is the last straw.
Eventually, according to Monique, she'd opened the car door. And that's when she claimed Tony had lunged at her.
She gave them the story that Tony Hayes started a physical confrontation with her while she was still sitting in her car. And she got frantic and grabbed the gun that was sitting in her seat and just started firing at Tony.
Monique told investigators that she'd shot 3 or 4 times, leaving Tony dead on the garage floor. She was afraid police wouldn't believe her story. So in her panic, she asked her 16-year-old son, Donald Wallace, to help her get rid of the body.
She says she freaked out. She went into shock. She didn't know what to do. So the only thing she could think to do was have her son help her hide it.
Later that evening, Monique was in the back of a police cruiser as it pulled into the parking lot of an East Memphis apartment complex.
I was in a vehicle with like three detectives, and cars followed, and I showed them, where the apartments were.
From her seat inside the squad car, Monique pointed out Tony Hayes' Lexus.
One of the detectives stayed with Monique Johnson inside the car that they went in, while other members of the department went and opened the trunk.
Tony Hayes, presumably, was no longer a missing person.
When they opened the trunk, Tony Hayes' body had been sitting in there for several days and was rotted and decomposed beyond recognition.
Monique Johnson was sitting in the car. It was about 25 feet away from where the trunk was, and she turned on the air conditioner because the stench from the body was so bad.
Calling in crime scene technicians to remove and identify the body, detectives also paid a visit to Tony's family, who had gathered at his mother's house. They were already expecting the worst.
I already knew he was dead, but, I was like, it just took a lot out of me.
Meanwhile, the detectives hauled Monique back to the station.
Then they took her back down to the Justice Center, and that's when she was placed under arrest.
But once Monique was booked on murder charges, the authorities faced a dilemma.
She worked at the jail. This woman was a jailer.
Could they put Monique in the same jail where she worked? At the police station, Monique was taken back to an interrogation room while investigators tried to figure out what to do next.
I sat in the room till probably like after midnight maybe that morning. They took me to Germantown jail, I think it was.
Held temporarily in a suburban Memphis jail, Monique had to adjust to life on the opposite side of the bars.
Only thing they feed you is banquet TV dinners. A lot of times they would still be cold. Sometimes they would be so hard from where they let them stay in the microwave too long.
How long would Monique have to endure TV dinners behind bars? If her account of Tony's death was true, it was a clear case of self-defense. But was it? Coming up, the physical evidence, according to the prosecution, raises questions about Monique's story.
Tony Hayes is 6'1", and Monique Johnson is 5'6". She was standing over him while he had dropped.
On the morning of September 8, 2006, Monique Johnson awoke for the first time in her life inside a jail cell. The 37-year-old corrections officer had been locked up the night before after leading police to the badly decomposed body of her boyfriend, Memphis cop Tony Hayes.
One could not recognize his face. We had to use a fingerprint expert to identify his body.
Monique admitted shooting Tony, but although charged with murder, she also swore she was innocent.
This was all Tony being the first aggressor, Monique being afraid and fearful for her life, and then defending herself.
But after cops learned that Monique had tried to hide Tony's corpse inside the trunk of his Lexus for 3 days, they began to suspect there was more to her story than a simple case of self-defense.
That body cooked. His eyeballs were starting to pop out. His skin was starting to slide off. To me, it almost looked like a horror movie.
The following morning, while Monique sat in jail, Memphis homicide detectives began a full investigation into her claims. They began by questioning Monique's son, Donald Wallace, at police headquarters.
Donald Wallace was very cooperative with the detectives and told them about how his mother had commanded him to get rid of the murder weapon.
With Donald's help, detectives recovered the pistol Monique used to kill Tony from a dumpster in an East Memphis suburb.
The murder weapon that Monique Johnson used to kill Tony Hayes and told her son to get rid of was a .40 caliber handgun that was Tony Hayes' personal weapon.
And that wasn't all detectives learned when they questioned Monique's son.
The night of the murder, Monique Johnson, by her own admission, left Tony Hayes to rot in the heat in the trunk of his own car while she went with her family and her son to a movie and dinner.
After she shot him 6 times and put him in the trunk of his Lexus, she went and met her girlfriends with her son for dinner and went and saw snakes on the plane.
It was certainly bizarre behavior. But was it merely an irrational act by a woman in shock? Or was it a deliberate attempt to disguise what she'd done? An answer suggested itself minutes later when Monique's son Donald revealed a surprising detail he recalled from the night of the shooting.
Donald Wallace told the police that he heard the shooting up in her master bedroom and master bathroom.
And although Monique had confessed to shooting Tony in the garage, investigators had found one peculiar detail earlier that day that suggested Donald was the one telling the truth.
One thing that struck them as unusual was in her master bathroom, there were double doors that did not match. One tint was slightly darker than the other.
Lieutenant Mason was saying that the doors didn't match up. And they saw a bucket where she had been mopping, getting stuff up off the floor.
Between Donald's statements and the suspicious findings in Monique's bathroom, detectives suspected Monique may be hiding something. A few hours later, they hauled her back down to police headquarters and confronted her with their findings.
They confronted her with those facts on Friday, the day after the first statement, and then Monique Johnson gave a second statement, and then admitted that she killed him in her master bathroom, but gave a different story surrounding the murder.
According to Monique's new story, she'd eventually wrestled away and bolted up the stairs towards her bedroom. But Tony, Monique claimed, had been right behind her.
This time her story was that he started a physical struggle with her in the garage and continued to hit her as she walked through her house up the stairs.
He closed the door behind us and he shoved me. And I kind of stumbled a little bit on the bed.
Monique said that cornered in her bedroom and scared for her life, she'd begged Tony to leave.
I said, get out and leave. I said, because I'm sick of it just like you are. I'm not willing to keep going through this.
But her words, according to Monique, only made Tony angrier.
He mugged me. And I fell up against the frame of the door and we got to fighting there.
He pushes her and she falls into the bathroom.
Scrambling to her feet, Monique said she'd retreated to her bathroom closet where she kept a gun hidden for protection. But once she grabbed the pistol, she said Tony had merely laughed.
And he said, you won't shoot me. And I was like, if you don't leave, I will.
He turned around as if he was going to go.
But just as Tony reached the door, Monique said he'd suddenly whipped around and charged at her with his fist clenched.
I feared that he was going to beat me senseless, and I fired the gun.
Then Monique claimed she'd blacked out.
And the next thing I remember, I heard my son beating on the bedroom door and calling me. He asked me what had happened. I told him that I had shot him.
Monique told investigators she'd asked her son Donald to help her hide Tony's body in the trunk of his Lexus. Then, after stashing Tony's car at an East Memphis apartment complex, Monique's son picked her up. Then she'd returned home and begun a hasty cleanup.
A bullet had gone into one of those doors, and she went to a construction site that was abandoned at the time, got a door, and replaced it.
Monique claimed she had concocted her first story about shooting Tony in the garage to protect her son from his role in helping dispose of Tony's body.
I hate that my son had to be there. He had nothing to do with it.
And what about Monique? Was she as innocent as she claimed? To authorities, her shifting stories cast doubt on her self-defense scenario.
Even with me and him in a heated argument, he'd just rather leave the house. He would never put his hands on a woman. It's not him.
She was trying to cover for herself. Any facts that were adverse to her, she was going to try to make up for.
Was Monique's account of Tony's death the truth? According to his autopsy on September 8th, Tony Hayes had been shot a total of 6 times. However, it wasn't how many times Monique shot Tony that suggested she hadn't acted in self-defense. It was where she shot him.
5 of those shots, at least, were from the back. In his head, and in his shoulders, in his back.
And according to the autopsy, most of the bullets that entered Tony's back were fired from a downward trajectory.
Tony Hayes is 6'1", and Monique Johnson is 5'6". And I don't see any other way that she could have pulled off those shots, if not for the fact that she was standing over him while he had dropped.
He was already down by the time at least half of those shots came out. So why did she keep shooting?
To prosecutors, the answer was clear. Monique had aimed to kill Tony.
Monique Johnson's murdering of Tony Hayes was no frantic reaction to any kind of an attack. It was deliberate, and it was premeditated, and it was bullet by bullet.
On February 8, 2007, the Shelby County District Attorney's Office brought Monique's case to the grand jury. Based on the strength of the evidence, the grand jury indicted Monique with first-degree premeditated murder.
She was given a bail of $1 million.
Story a third time, adding a twist that just might offer the former corrections officer a ticket out. On February 12, 2008, Monique Johnson walked into a Memphis courthouse to stand trial for murder. She was accused of killing her boyfriend, Tony Hayes, and hiding his body in the trunk of his car. Charged with first-degree murder, the 39-year-old corrections officer faced life in prison if convicted.
She was a cop killer. And then she involved her 16-year-old son, Donald, helping her to put Tony's body in a trunk.
In their opening statement, prosecutors portrayed Monique Johnson as a scorned and vindictive woman who'd savagely murdered her boyfriend after she discovered his latest act of infidelity.
He was cheating on her, and she wasn't going to take it.
It was cold-blood murder. It was very malicious. It was out of anger. It was out of jealousy. It was out of rejection.
Citing the number of rounds fired, the trajectory of the bullets, and the callous means by which she tried to cover her tracks, prosecutors argued Monique murdered Tony Hayes by shooting him 6 times in the head and back as he cowered helplessly beneath her.
If she was shooting one shot to stop him from coming towards her, then what explains gunshots in the back of his head and at a downward angle, which means he was down? He was not coming towards her anymore. There was not a threat of attack any longer.
Monique Johnson executed Tony Hayes by putting 6 bullets in him, including in the back of the head and several to the back. And then as soon as she executed him, began a course of evasion, including a path of lying and deception to his closest family members, to law enforcement officers.
In their opening argument, Monique's attorneys attacked Tony's character, describing him as an abusive man who had attacked his girlfriend after being questioned about his unfaithfulness.
It wasn't a situation that Monique planned to kill him, dump the body, and then go to see a movie and go to dinner. This was all Tony being the first aggressor, Monique being afraid and fearful for her life, and then defending herself. And after the fact, panicking, not knowing what to do, not knowing who she could trust, not knowing who to turn to.
But Monique's attorneys asserted that September 4th, 2006 wasn't the first time Tony had assaulted Monique. According to the defense, Monique had been pushed to the breaking point by Tony's abuse.
This case was about the things that happened during the course of that relationship to lead up to the day in the bathroom when Monique was faced with the choice of sparing her own life or taking Tony Hayes' life.
As evidence of the abuse Monique suffered under Tony, the defense presented several family members who recalled observing bruises on Monique's body.
She started having bruises on her neck and her face, and I used to always ask her what happened. She wouldn't tell me.
I have seen a bruise that was on her upper thigh that looked more like a foot bruise. I have seen like the finger marks around the neck where she tried to hide it with the makeup.
On cross, prosecutors fired back, arguing there were no official reports or evidence of physical abuse in Tony and Monique's relationship.
There was nothing on paper, there was nothing on the record that showed Monique Johnson had ever been abused. She had never gone to the hospital and filed a report. There were no pictures on documents.
Instead, the prosecutors argued it was Monique who was the true aggressor in the relationship. As evidence, they pointed to her rampage in May of 2006, months before the shooting.
She not just vandalized his property, but did it in a very deliberate and methodical way, cutting clothes garment by garment, keying words on his car and his headboard.
She didn't seem like she was afraid or that she was an abused woman. Yeah, because if you were an abused woman, the first thing you would not do is vandalize somebody's house, because you would think, he's gonna come after me.
Which Monique was the real one? The abused girlfriend described by the defense, or the jealous lover who, according to prosecutors, would lash out when crossed? On February 14th, Valentine's Day, the jury would get to see for themselves. That afternoon, Monique took the stand in her own defense.
During Monique's testimony, we walked through the entire relationship. How, after about 3 or 4 months, there was the first incident of violence, and Tony hit her.
It was abuse that, according to Monique's testimony, she had frequently suffered at Tony's hands.
He would punch me in my thighs, in my upper thighs, my upper arms. And I'm easy to bruise, so it didn't take much, but like I say, my thighs would be sore from where he would bend to punch me in them when we'd be fighting.
She described episodes of him throwing her up against the wall and having his hand on her neck, choking her, and her begging him to let her go. And then she described vivid sexual abuse of him forcing her to have sex. And she got very choked up at the trial when she started talking about this.
Then, Monique explained how she feared for her life the day of the shooting.
I thought he was gonna beat my ass. Before I could blink, he had turned back around and had took like one step toward me, and that's when I just started shooting.
Did you want to kill Tony?
No.
It was the only time in the trial we saw emotion from her, and it was explicit emotion.
On February 15th, the trial broke for deliberations. As the jury filed out of the courtroom, everyone was left wondering the same thing. What would the jury consider more credible? The physical evidence presented by the state, or Monique's dramatic testimony? Coming up, the verdict in Monique Johnson's trial is revealed. On February 15, 2008, 39-year-old Monique Johnson sat in a holding cell at the Shelby County Courthouse in Memphis, Tennessee. Accused of shooting her boyfriend, police officer Tony Hayes, Monique admitted to pulling the trigger. She said it was self-defense, but the prosecutors called it murder. And that afternoon, as the minutes slowly ticked by, it was up to a jury to decide.
When the jurors went to deliberate, it seemed like forever. I was just in this little tank waiting.
Finally, at 7 p.m., the jury announced it had reached a decision. But which one would it be?
Everybody that was watching the trial, the public, the family, the friends, even the media, seemed to be pretty sure that this was going to result in a first-degree murder conviction.
And Monique seemed just as certain. When bailiffs led her into the courtroom minutes later, she avoided the jurors' gaze. Little could have prepared Monique or anyone else there for what they heard when the foreman rose and read the verdict. Instead of first-degree murder, jurors found Monique guilty of the lesser charge of reckless homicide.
I was shocked by the result. The jury heard the same facts that we did.
Rather than facing life in prison, reckless homicide meant Monique faced a maximum sentence of just 4 years.
I wanted to scream. I ran out of that courtroom. It was like they found his body all over again.
I knew it was less of a charge than what they had charged me with, but what it was exactly was, I did not know.
Not only had Monique avoided a first-degree murder conviction, she'd also avoided going to prison. In light of the jail time Monique had served prior to trial, Judge Paula Scahan commuted her 4-year sentence to probation.
The requirements was that Monique was to go to counseling, maintain full-time employment, do some community service, and report to her probation officer.
I just couldn't understand how they could just let her just walk away with, just with so less of time, and knowing that she had admitted that she had killed him.
Following her trial, Monique retreated home to her family and attempted to restart her life. But not, she claims, without regrets.
I hate that it happened the way it did. To this day, I still care about Tony. I was in love with Tony, and I miss him.
Tony was shot 4 times in the back and then once in the back of the head. Monique Johnson got away with cold-blooded murder.
In the small town of Peru, Indiana, few couples generated more gossip than attorney Jim Grund and his wife, Susan.
Jim and his trophy wife was the perception people had of him.
Susan certainly looked the part.
Susan had the boobs to hilt and the high heels.
And in a town like Peru, it was perhaps inevitable the two ended up together.
He enjoyed the finer things in life, was known to like a cocktail, cute girls.
There was an instant attraction.
He found her quite exciting.
But when Jim Grund is shot dead in August of 1992, authorities find themselves asking, had the former prosecutor strayed too close to the edge?
Authorities looked into people that Jim had put away as a prosecutor.
Or had Jim and Susan's instant attraction turned fatal? 1992, hauling kids around. Son Jacob was spending the night at a campground with friends. Meanwhile, with her big brother gone, daughter Tanel was hosting a sleepover for her cousin.
Susan Grund walked into the house after having brought the girls home, walked in, thought that her husband initially was asleep.
When I called out, he didn't respond.
It was late, and Jim had been out to dinner with his brother-in-law, Fred.
So I thought, well, maybe they had one too many to drink. Sometimes when he would go meet Fred, they would drink a little bit.
I had asked Mom if I could kiss Dad goodnight, and she didn't want me to because she said he was sleeping.
Susan sat the 7-year-olds down in front of the TV. Then she went upstairs where Jim Grund was sprawled out on a couch in the couple's bedroom. But he wasn't asleep or drunk.
The next thing we heard was Mom crying upstairs.
He'd been shot.
The bullet has traveled through his eye, through his brain, out the back of his head and into the sofa.
A prominent attorney shot dead in his own bedroom. The crime left police scrambling for a suspect.
He was a prosecutor. He was an attorney. He probably had a lot of enemies.
But had the killer come from Jim's past or Susan's? Jim Grund first met Susan on a blind date in June of 1984. But he wasn't blind for long. He knew right away that Susan came with baggage.
Had a lot of past and a lot of baggage. So I actually went overboard in telling him every little everything about me.
Originally from Peru, Indiana, Susan had left home in 1975. Only 17, she'd run off to Oklahoma with her first husband, Ronnie Lovell.
He played in a band, and he was just exciting.
If you're a rock and roller, you're supposed to have pretty women hanging on your shoulder, and Susie fit the bill.
Ronnie wasn't the only shoulder Susan had hung on to in those days either.
Infidelity was commonplace among all the bands. We just traveled the circuit and we slept the circuit.
Susan and Ronnie divorced in 1979. A second short marriage to a construction worker named Gary Campbell produced a son named Jacob.
He decided to get a divorce, and she gained custody of my son.
By 1982, Susan had remarried, but that marriage, her third, ended when Susan was accused of beating her stepson. The boy's father filed for divorce, and Susan faced criminal charges. Although in the end, prosecutors cut a deal and allowed her to plead no contest.
The prosecution, it seems, didn't feel that they had a strong enough case.
Susan received probation for the child abuse charge. However, the charges did cost Susan custody of her son.
One day I got a call from the DHS office, and they had said they took my son Jacob away from Susan.
In the summer of 1984, Jacob went to live with his father, and Susan went back home to Peru. She was broke, alone, and pregnant.
After she had left her third husband, she'd had a brief relationship with another man.
All of her resources were exhausted. She doesn't have a husband. She's been essentially found guilty of child beating. So the only thing to do is to return home and regroup.
And within weeks of arriving, a chance encounter would set Susan on a path for Peru's social pinnacle.
Suddenly, through a friend, comes the offer of a blind date.
A recently divorced attorney and single dad named Jim Grund sounded like a hot prospect.
Jimmy was a third-generation lawyer.
She called me and told me she met Jim, and she was just so excited about him, and Jim was a wonderful man.
Jim was bigger than life, just a brilliant attorney.
Jim was 10 years Susan's senior, but he didn't act like it.
Jim liked to live on the edge. He flew airplanes. Jim liked to ski. He was pretty good at partying at times.
He enjoyed the finer things in life, was known to like a cocktail, cute girls.
The blind date with Susan had started out as a joke on the part of Jimmy's friends.
They're telling Jimmy she's pretty hot. What Jim didn't know is that this attractive lady was pregnant.
But when the pair met, the supposed joke backfired.
He didn't stop looking at me or talking to me the entire evening. So we knew that there was an instant attraction upon first meeting.
The attraction was mutual.
When I placed my hand in his, it was just there, immediately when we looked at each other.
Soon they were dating. And by the time Susan's daughter Tanel was born in October, things were turning serious.
He was running around looking like a proud papa when Tanel come into this world.
Barely a month later, he officially became Tanel's stepfather.
Jim called my mother and told her that they had gone to Florida and gotten married.
We had a beautiful wedding out on the water, and we honeymooned there in Florida. We just traveled around the Keys.
By the end of the year, Jim and Susan were back in Peru, where she soon settled into life as the wife of a prominent attorney.
Susan became a part of Jim's lifestyle of having a nice place to live, nice cars to drive, nice people on a higher level to go out with, have dinner with. Really, it was Jim inviting her into his life and family, and her sharing those benefits.
Jim's family wasn't quite so welcoming, particularly his teenage son, David.
As with any child, when their parents are divorced, he wasn't real accepting of the relationship.
People around Peru couldn't help but notice the difference in Jim and Susan's ages either.
Jim and his trophy wife was the perception people had of him. I don't think many of the wives cared a lot for Susan.
Susan turning their husbands' heads didn't help either.
She had the boobs to hilt and the high heels. She would dress in all these frilly outfits, very revealing, no matter where she was. She was the center of attention, and she made sure that she was.
Jim and Susan were also as close as Peru came to jet-setters, even if Jim's plane was only a Cessna. And the couple made frequent flights to Oklahoma to see Susan's son.
Him and my mother would fly down and come get me, and I made several trips back and forth from Peru to Oklahoma.
But did Jim know why Susan had lost custody of her son? According to his friend Bruce Embry, he did.
Jim did know about it. If Jim was satisfied with her, I wasn't going to delve into it to any great extent.
So on one visit to Oklahoma, Jim made a proposition to Gary Campbell, the boy's father.
Jim suggested to Gary that we could take care and regain custody of Jacob, and he wouldn't have that burden on him anymore.
Campbell agreed and signed the paperwork Jim had drawn up. Although, according to Campbell, he was also under the mistaken impression that the arrangement was temporary.
After that year was up and I was well on my feet, trying to get my son back, well, they had changed his name, and there's nothing I could do about it.
Jim formally adopted Jacob. His relationship with his biological children, on the other hand, had become increasingly strained on account of Susan. The teenagers were less than pleased with their new stepmother.
We always laughed because they called her the step monster.
David Grund, in particular, appeared to be especially upset by the way his father carried on with Susan.
They were huggy, she would come over and sit on his lap, and sometimes it was a little much for us to take.
The man just doted on me. I felt like a princess all the time.
Jim also spoiled his two stepchildren.
Life was really good in Peru. We never wanted for anything.
Dad always gave me whatever I wanted.
Susan gave herself pretty much whatever she wanted, too.
She liked to be high fashion.
Every time we went out together as couples, I always felt very inferior because she had all these glamorous outfits.
Jim certainly appreciated how his wife looked, but he was less thrilled about how much she spent.
There was a few occasions that I seen Jim and Susan fight. I believe it was over money because she was spending too much.
Susan's spending wasn't all the couple fought over either.
Susan was known to be flirty and perhaps even a bit sleazy.
But did she do more than flirt? The gossips around Peru certainly thought so.
It's been rumored that she has had affairs with lawyers, doctors, very influential people that were very close with Jimmy.
By 1992, fights between Susan and Jim had become a regular occurrence, and there were signs that their marriage was coming apart.
There was an incident where they were fighting, and she made me help her move stuff down to the basement, and she asked me, how would you feel if Jim and I got a divorce?
The last blow-up between Jim and Susan came at the end of July, during a family vacation to Alaska.
I don't know what the fight was about, but my mother was yelling, and she told us, pack your bags, we're flying back home.
Jacob and Tanel did as their mother told them. By the time they were packed, however, Susan had calmed down. The family flew back home as planned together. But Susan and Jim's days at the pinnacle of Peru's jet set were numbered. 2 nights later, during her daughter's sleepover, Susan Grund walked into her bedroom and saw her husband sprawled upon a sofa.
He's relaxed. He's laying as if napping or asleep.
She shook him, trying to wake him up. And all she said she noticed was on one side of his mouth was light little drop of blood.
Susan dialed 911. But when the paramedics arrived, it quickly became obvious that Jim Grund wouldn't be going to the hospital.
They told me they had to take him, and I didn't want him to. They told me it was too late.
Coming up, was the killer someone Jim put away?
I had a conversation with the sheriff about a young man that came to mind.
Or was it someone he took in?
It went as far as them looking in my locker for a gun.
A little before midnight on August 3rd, 1992, paramedics arrived at the Peru, Indiana home of Jim and Susan Grund. Moments earlier, Susan had called 911 and reported finding her husband, a prominent local attorney, unconscious on the sofa.
From a distance, he looks fine and appeared to be napping or at rest.
But Jim Grund wasn't napping. He was dead, killed by a gunshot to his left eye.
The bullet has traveled through his eye, through his brain, out the back of his head and into the sofa. And there's no reviving him.
And when the first police arrived on the scene moments later, word of Jim's death quickly spread throughout the small town. Bruce Embry, Jim's friend and a county judge, was among the first to hear.
I got a call from Will Siders, who's the prosecuting attorney, saying that he was at Jim Grunn's house and there was a need for the execution of warrants. That's what's going on.
Informed of Jim's death, Embry headed to what was already becoming a crowded crime scene.
There were a lot of people that had no relevance to a crime scene investigation. Family, business associates, civic leaders that were there that just did not need to be there.
Jim was so closely connected to the county's legal authorities, in fact, that the Indiana State Police quickly stepped in and took the lead in the investigation.
Detective Bob Brinson from the Indiana State Police exhibited his authority over Miami County and over Peru Police to take control of the crime scene.
Out of an abundance of caution, the prosecutor wanted warrants before they searched anything in the house. So in the garage, we took testimony under oath, tape recorded it, and I issued warrants for the search of parts of the house.
Investigators also tried to take a statement from Susan, but she appeared to be so shaken by the discovery of her husband's dead body that she had little to offer.
And there I was, all by myself with 2 small children, and my husband is dead. Everything becomes just horribly, just frantic at that point.
She just kept saying that she didn't know how this could happen or didn't know who could have done this.
Police didn't know either, but a quick search of the bedroom suggested an intruder.
There were drawers that were pulled open in their bedroom, and clothes were kind of all messed up.
If an intruder had shot Jim Grund, however, police were unable to determine how he or she had gotten into the bedroom.
Police first looked for any point of forced entry, garage, house, front door, back door, and found none. So it was puzzling to them how someone could have come in and done this.
Had a door been left unlocked? If so, police were still left wondering who could have harbored a grudge against Jim Grund.
Authorities looked into people that Jim had put away as a prosecutor. They didn't find anyone that fit the profile or could have been there.
Running out of candidates for an intruder, police began to ponder another possibility. Was there no forced entry because the killer didn't need to break in? On the morning of August 4th, investigators started taking a closer look at the Grund family, starting with Jim's widow.
I went to the police station to answer questions, to tell them exactly what everyone had done all day long and anything that I could offer to help.
Then she mentioned something else, something that caught the investigators' attention. Susan suggested that police take a closer look at her stepson.
David and his father argued all the time. They never had a meeting where something didn't happen.
Did David have a motive to kill his father? Did he have the means? A quick check of state records revealed that the 21-year-old had recently acquired a 9mm handgun. Odder still, he'd reported it stolen just 1 month before his father's death.
On the 4th of July, 1992, David Grund reports that his apartment's been broken into and that his gun has been stolen.
Brought in for questioning, David had a ready explanation. He told police his father had known all about the gun and the subsequent theft.
He had told his dad, Jimmy, that he had gotten a handgun and the permit would probably come to their house. And he told his dad, will you let me know when the permit comes in?
But when the permit arrived, according to David, it was Susan who brought it by the apartment.
Susan took the permit, went out to David's house the afternoon of July the 4th and said, hey, your gun permit came to the house. Let me see. Can I see the gun?
David told police he'd taken the pistol out of a dresser drawer, shown it to his stepmother, and then returned it to its hiding place.
When David and his girlfriend got home that evening, the house had been broken into, the screen was slit, the gun was gone.
Which one of the Grunds was telling the truth? Was Susan trying to divert attention from herself? Or was David trying to steer police back towards his stepmother? Only one thing was certain. David's information sent police on a frantic search for the murder weapon.
They even had helicopters involved with some kind of metal detectors looking for the gun. They looked in the river, they looked everywhere they could think of to look.
It even went as far as them looking for a gun in my locker or my book bag.
While police searched for the murder weapon, Peru was pondering the bigger question: whose finger had been on the trigger?
The buzz around Peru and Miami County was, you know, she did it. That's what people were saying in restaurants and cafes and after hours at the bars.
At Jim's standing room only funeral on August 6th, no one came right out and accused Susan of murder. But she got the message regardless.
There was a visitation line for the Gruns, and there was a line for her, and no one was in her line. Because at that point, everybody in town already formed their opinion.
The police, however, weren't so sure.
They questioned David extensively.
Determined to find his father's killer and clear himself in the process, David cooperated with the investigation.
He told them where he had fired the gun. They dug the slugs out of whatever it was, telephone pole, or wherever he had fired it.
The slugs, along with the fatal one recovered from Jim and Susan's bedroom sofa, were sent to the crime lab for comparison. While the authorities waited for the results, they started digging into Susan's past. One thing immediately jumped out at them: Susan's child abuse charge from 10 years earlier.
As I read the file, I realized this child had been abused very extensively.
Susan had pled no contest, and even if she was capable of child abuse, Indiana authorities would need more evidence to prove she was capable of murder. On August 12th, the state crime lab confirmed that Jim Grund had been killed by his son's gun.
The police lab was able to match those slugs with the slug that killed Jim Grund.
And as David had already told police, Susan knew where he'd kept the gun. In fact, he'd shown it to her only hours before it had allegedly been stolen from his apartment. But did that mean Susan had shot Jim? Or was her stepson setting her up?
I never thought I would be a suspect. I thought that David would be implicated. It was highly suspicious that he bought the gun, and within a matter of weeks, he reports it stolen.
Coming up, will police find the missing gun? And if so, where?
Susan calls her sister and asks her, did they find it?
For years, Susan Grund had been the hot topic for gossip in the small town of Peru, Indiana. Married to the town's most prominent attorney, a man 10 years her senior, Susan's flirty ways and rumored affairs had kept Peru buzzing. And the buzz only intensified when Jim Grund was found shot dead in his own bedroom.
There were so many fingers pointing towards Susan.
They were on a witch hunt for me. They didn't even try to camouflage it.
By the end of the month, the accusing look she got all over town had become too much to bear.
Mother told me she was going to kill herself because she couldn't take the pressure anymore.
Susan loaded her children, Jacob and Tanel, into the car and drove to her mother's house 4 hours over their father's will. Jim Grund had amended the document less than a month before his death, and he'd apparently done it at Susan's request.
Jacob had not been in the prior will that he had written, only Tanel was in there.
And Jim, according to his sister Jane Allen, made the changes begrudgingly. The marriage was in trouble, torn apart by frequent arguments over finances and infidelity. But Jim didn't want Susan's constant nagging about the matter to sour their Alaska trip.
When he rewrote the will at the law office, the secretary said, "Are you sure you know what this will is reading?" And he said, "Yeah, I know. She wants me to change it before this trip to Alaska, and when we return, I will change it back."
Jim Grund never had the chance to undo the changes to his will. He was dead within days of returning from Alaska. Was the timing mere coincidence? His family didn't think so.
She could take off with the money, live happily ever after, and go find husband number 5.
Was that Susan's plan? Peru police soon had reason to think so. On November 2nd, 1992, Susan's sister Darlene contacted the authorities with a crucial piece of evidence: It was a conversation she'd had with her sister shortly after Susan had moved to Vincennes.
Darlene was living in their house in Peru. Susan had asked her to go to the house and protect it while she was gone.
But when Indiana State Police showed up one day with a warrant, there was little Darlene could do to stop them. She did, however, get word of the search to Susan.
Susan calls her sister and asks her, did they find it? She says, what do you mean? And she says, the gun.
That wasn't the end of Darlene's story either. To Susan's relief, Darlene had told her the police left empty-handed. And that's when, according to Darlene, Susan's behavior became even more suspicious. Within hours, Susan had rushed back to the house in Peru. And she'd come, according to her sister, for the gun that police had failed to find.
There'd been a feverish search for the weapon itself all over the house, and they missed it.
But little did they know, the gun had been hidden in the house the whole time.
The weapon was actually hidden by Susan Grund in a teddy bear at her and her husband's house in Peru.
Susan retrieved the teddy bear, and then the sisters had driven back to Vincennes together. Darlene said she never actually saw the gun, but during the drive, according to Darlene, Susan had explained what was going on.
Susan's in the car with Darlene and confesses to her that she shot Jim.
Of course, being Susan's sister, the poor thing, she didn't know what to do with the information.
Darlene said that after 2 agonizing months, she decided to come forward and betray her sister's trust. Now the challenge for investigators was, if Susan had confided in Darlene once, would she do it again? And could they get it on tape?
The police wired Darlene, and they went down to Vincennes.
With police listening in, Darlene dropped by her mother's and confronted her sister about the shooting. But this time, Susan not only denied killing Jim, she denied ever confessing in the first place.
I said, I don't know why you're saying this. So why are you saying this? Because I didn't say that to her.
One of the sisters was lying, and the Indiana State Police were pretty sure they knew which one. On November 2nd, they presented an Indiana judge with Darlene's statement about Susan's alleged confession, David's missing gun, and the changing of Jim's will. At 4:30 a.m. the next morning, fresh off the judge's desk, the police were back in Vincennes with the warrant for Susan Grund's arrest.
Mom and I shared the same room, and I was sleeping, and I just remember policemen barging into the room, and they took her.
4 hours later, she was back in Peru, being booked on first-degree murder charges.
It was 3 months almost to the day. We were very sure that she had done it, and that was the break that they needed.
But would it be enough? The attempt to back it up with a taped confession had failed, but there was still one piece of evidence that could confirm Darlene's account. While Susan was settling into the Miami County Jail, investigators in Vincennes searched her mother's house for David's missing 9mm.
They tore the house apart looking for a gun.
They didn't find the gun, or the teddy bear Susan had supposedly hidden it in. And the lack of a murder weapon wasn't the only hurdle standing in the state's way as Susan's trial approached. Susan's lawyer, Charlie Scruggs, filed for a change of venue, arguing Susan couldn't get a fair trial in Peru, where the Grunds had been prominent attorneys for generations. The motion succeeded, but only partially. The trial would take place in Peru, but before an outside judge and jury.
And the jurors were drawn from Warsaw, which is 20, 30 miles away from Peru. So there was some detachment there.
Would it be the break Susan needed? After all, other than her sister's statement and a wiretap conversation that proved fruitless, the case against her was largely circumstantial.
Based on motive and the statements of her sister, law enforcement have enough to make a case against Susan and bring her to trial, but they don't yet have the murder weapon.
Then, in August of 1993, with her trial scheduled to begin in little more than a month, a second member of Susan's family contacted the state police. This time, it was Susan's own mother.
Susan's mother, Nellie Sanders, finds this old wash tub that has been around for some time.
The tub, as Nellie Sanders told police, had gone missing almost a year earlier when Susan moved in after Jim's death.
Nellie had asked Susan what happened to that big heirloom, and Susan told her, oh, it was old and ugly, and I just threw it away.
Therefore, as Susan's mother explained to police, she'd been surprised to find the tub in her attic nearly a year later.
There at the top of the steps was this big old family heirloom pot.
Odder still was what she had found in it. The tub was filled to the brim with concrete. Thinking something was peculiar, Nellie picked up the phone and called the police. And as soon as the conversation was finished, detectives drove out to Vincennes to investigate the find.
When they break open the cement, they find a handgun.
Not just any gun either.
When they clean the handgun and can read the serial numbers on it, they find that it is the gun that was stolen from David Grund's apartment.
Coming up, Susan's testimony raises new questions. Had she hidden the gun to protect herself or the true killer?
Jim had gone on a trip, and while he was gone, we went out dancing and drinking, and it began that night.
On the morning of September 27, 1993, Susan Grund walked into a Peru, Indiana courtroom to stand trial for her husband's murder. As usual, she turned quite a few heads, but this time the crowd in the courtroom did a double take.
She essentially dressed like a very conservative librarian or widow in black, very dressed down for her persona, and it was quite unexpected.
Prosecutor Will Sider's opening statement, on the other hand, focused on Susan's usual personal appearance, the over-the-top trophy wife Peru was used to. He described the defendant as a woman unwilling to give up the flashy clothes and fancy lifestyle she enjoyed as a lawyer's wife.
Prosecutor's theory was that her husband was going to file for divorce soon, that she was afraid of losing financial benefits of being married to him, and that she had financial benefits to gain by killing him.
But was Susan the only person with a motive to murder Jim? According to the defense's open, Jim's son David had a motive.
The theory of defense was he had motive to commit the offense, or at the very least to lie about her involvement.
And the reason the defense gave stunned the entire courtroom. David wasn't just Susan's stepson. According to the defense, the 23-year-old had also been her lover.
Susan, in her own defense, put David forward not only as a suspect, but as someone that had had an affair with her.
The Grunds almost had a heart attack. I really think so. They were like, oh, no, 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 no.
Had David Grund killed his father in a jealous rage? And when the police started asking questions, did he point the finger at his stepmother as a diversion? Prosecutors discounted the possibility, showing Susan had plenty of opportunity to commit the crime. That afternoon, during testimony from Indiana State Police investigators, they presented jurors with an elaborate timeline tracking Susan's movements the evening of the murder. Shuttling Jacob to a campsite, coming back home, only to leave again to pick up her daughter and niece for a sleepover back at the house.
They were trying to track her whereabouts down to the minute.
Her 2 trips, according to the prosecution, had left Susan enough time to slip home and shoot Jim.
The state argued that Susan Grund had sufficient time to get from where she had dropped the kids off out to her and her husband's home, commit the act, and then get back to where the kids were.
Prosecutors also claimed that Susan had access to the murder weapon. Calling her stepson David to the stand, he testified that he'd shown Susan the 9mm handgun just hours before it went missing on July 4th, 1992.
His testimony was important to the state because it established Susan Grund had knowledge of where the handgun was located in his home.
But was it the truth? During cross-examination, Susan's attorney questioned her stepson about the alleged affair.
David Grund denied any type of intimate relationship with Susan Grund.
It was, according to Susan, a lie.
David Grund got on the stand and thought he was Bill Clinton, and I knew exactly how Hillary Clinton felt, or Monica Lewinsky felt too, when she was sitting there listening to somebody deny something. If you're denying something that adamantly, if you're lying about it, you're hiding something.
But if David was lying and he was the shooter, how did his gun get to Susan's mother's house? On September 29th, Nellie Sanders, Susan's mother, took the stand and told her story about the tub full of concrete in her attic. The tub where, according to the prosecutors, Susan had hidden the murder weapon beneath a layer of concrete.
You could see in her the anguish of telling it and getting it out.
The same was true the next day when Susan's sister Darlene took the stand.
Darlene was nervous and quiet, but you could get the sense that she knew the facts and knew that they needed to come out.
And the facts, as Darlene told them, were damning.
She told us Susan had talked about the killing and that she needed help in moving the gun.
It was devastating to sit there and watch Darlene saying I confessed to her.
Susan had reason to be devastated. Not only were her mother and sister's statements strong evidence for the prosecution, they'd also led police to the missing gun.
There are two family members that are the least likely people in the world to make up anything. They don't want Susan to be guilty.
With her own family testifying for the prosecution, Susan had few people to turn to. When the defense started presenting its case later that afternoon, Charlie Scruggs called Susan to the stand.
He didn't call any defense witnesses. It was just her up there by herself.
In tears, she described finding Jim's dead body. But it wasn't all she claimed she'd found that night.
I looked down, and there by his hand is the gun. Not knowing what it was, what was going on, I grabbed up the gun and the phone at the same time to call for help.
But before the police arrived, Susan said she'd realized who the pistol belonged to. Panicking, she'd hidden it.
I honestly thought I was protecting David.
Next, Susan admitted that the rumors around town were true. She did sleep around.
I did. I had other affairs over a course of several years, possibly.
And she claimed her affair with David had started one night while his father was out of town.
He took a yearly trip to Canada to go fishing. And while he was gone, we went out dancing and drinking, and it began that night.
And it continued for about 2 years, according to Susan, up until the time Jim was murdered.
She painted a very believable tale of passion and clandestine meetings and lovemaking.
But would the jury believe it? Were Susan and her stepson having a torrid affair? Could David have killed his father out of jealousy? And did that explain why Susan had hidden his gun? On September 30th, the jurors retired to consider a verdict. Several hours later, at 1:30 a.m., they returned to the courtroom. But they didn't return with a verdict. Instead, they announced they were deadlocked.
It's a late hour, and you really don't expect anything to come back other than guilty. So hopelessly deadlocked was really kind of a surprise.
Susan would soon face a second trial, and this time around she felt hopeful she would be able to convince an entire jury of her innocence.
In your mind, you want to think that they really won't find you guilty for something that you didn't do.
Susan would have plenty of time to think. She spent 5 months in jail awaiting her second trial. When proceedings started on March 7, 1994, in front of another out-of-town jury, the prosecution's case was essentially a repeat performance.
The state said, given the motive, given the opportunity, and then finally, given the fact that the weapon was found in her residence, those were all circumstances pointing to her guilty.
But when it was the defense's turn, the case took a very different course.
The judge made her refrain from saying a lot of the things that she wanted to say. They told her that she couldn't.
They wouldn't let me speak to the jury as I had the first time.
One thing in particular was strictly off limits. Although Susan did take the stand, she didn't make any mention of her alleged affair with David. And why not? According to Susan, her lawyer advised against it, caving under pressure from Jim's influential family.
I watched the Grunts close ranks in around their wayward grandson.
They just wasn't going to allow it.
Or was there another, easier explanation?
It's simply not true. It's too outlandish to be messing around with his older stepmother. It just doesn't make sense.
Whatever the reason, the change in Susan's testimony did make a difference. On March 16th, the jury found Susan Grund guilty of first-degree murder.
Everyone was just very elated. The county police, prosecutors, lawyers from everywhere that knew Jimmy.
Coming up, the judicial system has one more surprise in store for Susan.
Everything about Susan's past was not fair game until sentencing.
April 15th, 1994. A month after she'd been convicted of murdering her husband, Jim, Susan Grund was once again seated in a Peru, Indiana courtroom. It was the same courtroom Jim Grund had practiced law in as a prosecutor and defense attorney.
Jim Grund worked hard for his community and was a key player in the community.
And it was Jim's prominent position in Peru that, according to friend Bruce Embry, attracted Susan in the first place.
She wanted to be things that she was not, and she relished the role of being the wife of a lawyer.
It was a role Susan had lucked into 10 years earlier when she'd arrived in Peru broke, pregnant, and alone. But as Peru learned that afternoon at her sentencing hearing, those weren't the only reasons Susan had returned home.
Everything about Susan's past, for the most part, was not fair game until sentencing.
Jim Grund had known all about Susan's legal trouble back in Oklahoma, but it was only after she'd been convicted of his murder that the jury learned of Susan's record.
We as observers and the jury learned she had pled no contest to the severe beating of a stepchild.
The son of her third husband never recovered from the injuries he'd received at Susan's hands.
The ambulance and stuff had to come, and it just seemed like he wasn't right after that.
Susan had fared better, receiving only probation for the offense. But there'd be no escape this time. That afternoon, after receiving the jury's recommendation, the judge sentenced Susan to 60 years in prison.
The presumptive sentence at the time was 40 years. 20 could be added for aggravating circumstances, and the judge gave her the maximum sentence based on the prior felony conviction and the brutality of it.
Although according to son Jacob, despite pleading no contest, Susan has never admitted guilt in regards to the old child abuse charge. Barely more than a toddler when he witnessed his stepbrother's beating, Jacob recalls once asking his mother about it.
Years down the road, I told her that I remembered this stuff.
At the time, according to her son, Susan denied the beating ever occurred.
She told me that he was a very clumsy boy. I know all boys are clumsy, but these were bad.
Today, after serving over a decade in prison for murder, she still denies shooting her husband.
I did not kill my husband. I'm not saying that I didn't do wrong when I hid the gun. That was wrong.